I'm Riley. I love movies, so let's talk Knives Out. This is a modern day murder mystery. It was written and directed by Rian Johnson, who is fantastic. He's done a lot of great movies. I really liked it. If you could just imagine like having a conversation with him and picking his brain, like that's how I am. Like him and Stephen King were like top of my list that I'd just like to have a conversation with, right? So he created this movie. He got together a fantastic cast. One of my worries though is when you get a cast together like this, ensemble cast, like big ones, sometimes people can get lost or it doesn't work well together. This movie didn't really have that. Everyone was fantastic. There were a couple actors, the two like teenagers of the film, Katherine Langford, who plays Meg, and then Jaeden Martell, I think. He plays the young son Jacob, who's like a right-wing kind of kid. They call him like a Nazi in this, right? They weren't, I don't know, they weren't utilized the best, I guess, but they weren't the main focus, so I kind of get that. But I think they were also put into this movie because they are popular with their audience right now, right? People have seen 13 Reasons Why, they watch it, like they know who these kids are. And that's kind of an interesting thing when you think about it. Like everyone in this cast are pretty well known. Like everybody knows or have recognized or seen them in something. The only one that I think that was pretty new was Marta. She's Harlan's nurse in this. Her name by Anna de Martes. She was fantastic. Like she was definitely a standout for me. So was Chris Evans, of course, as Ransom, and then Daniel Craig as the southern, you know, kind of beefed up detective or private detective Benoit Blanc. It was interesting to me. It kind of threw me off for a second because I'm thinking, you know, oh, suave James Bond, British accent, and then he comes in with this like I said, it's just a different, he's such a shapeshifter basically. Like I believed him. It took a second and I was kind of like, but then I like got into it. It's a slow going process and it kind of works with the way his character's set up. He's like, oh, I'm just going to be an observer, and then at the end, like he's in it. He's the main person, right? And then surprisingly, someone who stood out to me, and I don't know if they meant to do this, but I found him hilarious and enjoyed his performance thoroughly, was Noah Segan. You recognize his face. He's one of those actors, but he plays Trooper Wagner. And he's almost like a comic relief, but he doesn't take it too far, and he's not cracking ridiculous jokes the whole time. It's just like the little things and the little way he's acting. Like he watches Daniel Craig's character, the Benoit Blanc, like do something and he's leaning forward like, wow, like this guy's good. You know, he does stuff like that. Or he's fangirling over the main guy Harlan, you know, Christopher Plummer's character who died, going, oh, I've read all his books. Like he's fantastic. And the family will say stuff about what like his books or something about the house, and he goes, oh yeah, that's from that book, or that's from that, or he just knows a little bit about everything, and he's just funny with everything. He'll be like, oh, when something happens, you know, and those kinds of things are funny. Like to me, this movie was surprisingly funnier than I thought it would be for a murder mystery, right? Or a modernized murder mystery. It was one of those things where you're just like, I loved him. Like I wanted to see a little bit more of him, but I realized he isn't a main character, but that's how much he stood out to me, right? That's how much I liked him and enjoyed his performance. And what's great to me about this movie is it starts and ends with this coffee cup, right? And at the beginning I noticed it, which is why I can think of it. In the end, I just found it funny by the time it ended. I just laughed so hard because it's, my house, my rules, my coffee. That's what it says. So just look out for that when you see this, right? And once you watch the whole movie, it makes complete sense and you just love the little irony in that. And there's a lot of little moments like that in this movie. And this is one of those movies where you leave feeling good about it and you enjoy it, but then you think back on it and you're like, oh, that's why that was. Or that makes more sense. Or not makes more sense, but you recognize all these little things that you think about later when you talk with someone and you're like, oh, I didn't notice that, but that does make sense. That does help you come to the conclusion of who done it, right? But what's modernized about this one, or I enjoyed a lot, is they pretty much tell you straight out who did it. And now that's why it's flipped and you're just kind of going, wait a minute. So we know who did it, and then we're watching this person like try to not get caught almost, but you feel for this person because at the same time you're just kind of going, well, it was an accident pretty much, like a horrible tragic accident. And then you slowly, with this huge ensemble cast, you're wondering if you're going to get lost in all these characters, but the way they introduce them in the beginning with the one-on-one with Jamie Lee Curtis's character Linda, who's the oldest daughter, having her, you know, like interview with Benoit Blanc, and you meet her, but then you see things from her perspective, right? So this is what's great about it, because us as an audience are watching this happen, and you see, like, he's asking them what happened the night Harlan died, the grandfather. And you'll see her flashback to what really happened. And then you see her in present day talking to the detective, telling her what she says happened. And they're lies. They all lie. Every single one of them in that one-on-one. Even Marta, who throws up when she lies, which is such a funny thing, but it helps the story. And so if she lies, she's the nurse who took care of Harlan. She gets sick, and that's important throughout the story. And so what's happening is you meet all these characters, you see that they all lie, and then when it gets to Marta's turn, spoilers, okay? When it gets to Marta's turn, she tells a variation of the truth. So she's not lying, but in her flashback, you see it was an accident. So she and Harlan are playing Go, which is their game they do every night, and he knocks over the board because he's losing and knocks over all the medicines, and she's picking it up and she's talking to him and she's not paying attention to what she's doing, and she gives him his medicine and she realizes she mixed them up. So she gave him 100 milligrams of morphine when you're only supposed to get like 3, and she's freaking out saying you only have 10 minutes, and he's trying to write it down going, what a great way to murder someone. And she's like, this isn't funny, and he's just so calm about it. She's like, you only have 10 minutes. He's like, well, we're 13 minutes out, no one's coming. And he's basically like, it's fine, like, Marta, it's fine. And she's freaking out wanting to call 911, and he stops her. And he goes, this is what we're gonna do so you don't get in trouble, so your mom doesn't get deported because her mom's not from here, you know? And he basically tells her how to cover his tracks, and she goes, no, we can save you. And he goes, no. And so he finally gets her to agree, because he's like, this is what I want to do this for you. He's like, I'm old, I'm 85. And she's like freaking out, and she agrees with it. So she does everything he says about how to cover her tracks, and she starts to go back to see him, and he slits his own throat. So he did kill himself. But, you know, it's one of those things where it was an accident and he may have died anyway. So then the whole rest of the movie is her trying to cover her tracks and Benoit Blanc being kind of onto her, but you don't really see it. And then there's one point where it like zooms in on her shoe, because they talk about how no one could have, like, it was a suicide. No one could have been there because of the way his throat was slit. You see a tiny drop of blood on her shoe. We as an audience see that, so you're like, oh no, right? So you're freaking out about that kind of stuff, and you're really rooting for her because you see she's a very nice, kind-hearted person. She freaked out about it. She feels for the family, and they all this family, like, they all tell her, like, she's part of the family, we love you. But then you'll see Walt, who's Harlan's son, played by Michael Shannon, being like, oh, I wanted to invite you to the funeral, but I was outvoted. But then at the same time, Linda, who's played by Jamie Lee Curtis, who's Harlan's daughter, goes, oh, I wanted to invite you to the funeral, but I was outvoted. But then they turn around and all call her family, but they don't really treat her like family. You know, they just say that. And then you find out Ransom finally comes, who's played by Chris Evans, who's also fantastic in this movie. He plays that arrogant, smug, like, rich boy thing perfectly. And you're watching him and you find out that they, through all these conversations with Harlan, they've all been cut out of the will. And everything's left to Marta. So now they all turn on to Marta and go, you need to give it to us, like, all this money. Like, were you sleeping with him? Were you this? Were you that? And she's like, no, you know, and she didn't even know all this was going to happen. And that's when you realize that Harlan took his own life because he didn't want Marta to not get his money. Because if she was, like, thought of as part of his death at any way at all, she wouldn't get his money, his house, his publishing empire, any of that. And he wanted her to have it, you know, because he realized his kids were all irritating, all brats. They needed to be standing up on their own. They were just using from his money, and she'd been his friend, his companion, his nurse for a while now, like, taking care of him, just talking to him, and he shared everything with her. He shared that, you know, Linda's husband, played by Don Johnson, was having an affair, that Toni Collette's character was double dipping, taking money for her daughter's tuition and for herself. You see that Ransom is just a spoiled rich trust fund kid, and he cuts him off. You see all these things, right? And he's just cutting everyone out of his family. Like Walt, played by Michael Shannon, he just goes, I've had you running my empire and you've never been able to do anything on your own. So he thinks he's setting everyone free. And then as this goes along, and she's trying to, like, cover her tracks, and he even told her, Harlan, as things come along, there's little things that you and I didn't talk about that might pop up that might lead this back to you, and you have to cover your tracks. So there's this one part where she gets this thing and she ends up finally telling Ransom, and he's basically feeds her with all this food, right? It was right after the will reading. He pretty much saves her. He gives her this food, and then he puts an empty bowl in front of her and goes, tell me what happened to my grandfather. And he goes, you can't lie because you put the bowl in front of you. So she tells him everything, and they work out this plan to, you know, get her off the hook. And then, you know, they get caught, and they go to this meeting part where there's this, where the blood toxicology report is coming out, and it's been photocopied, just the top, and they're going to the meetup, but then Ransom gets finally called in for questioning and all this stuff, and she goes to the meetup and finds Fran, who's the housekeeper, and she saves her life. But then she calls 911, and then Benoit Blanc shows up, and she ends up telling him everything because Ransom told them everything. So she's like, I gotta confess to the family and tell them it was me. And they go to do it, and then they find another copy, and they find out she was innocent, basically. Like, the drugs are mixed up. And then they pull Ransom in, and you find out Ransom was trying to set her up to like not let her have the money so the whole family could get the money, because like I said, if she was caught doing that, like Harlan knew, she wouldn't get anything. And there's that twist at the end where like you've been following the movie the whole time thinking, oh no, not Marta, like it was an accident, so she needs to do all these things because this family's not that great of a family either. And then you find out Ransom set up the whole thing, and then the twist on the twist is that she could tell the two vials apart, so even though they were labeled wrong, she still gave it to him wrong. So his blood was clean. Harlan's blood was clean, like he wasn't gonna die. If you just called the ambulance like she'd asked him to, he would still be alive, but he slit his own throat to protect her and take care of her and give her all his money. And then she gets on the phone because Ransom's like, well, I'm not gonna get in trouble for anything. What, like attempted, you know, like switching the vials, attempted murder, I'll get a slap on the wrist and a huge fine. And she's just like, ugh, and then the hospital calls her, and she's like, oh, Fran, the one you poisoned's alive. Like, she's gonna tell them everything. And he goes, what? And then she's freaking out, and then she throws up on him because she was lying. And he goes, and then she's like, oh, Fran's dead. And then he pulls a knife and he goes to stab her because he's like, in for a penny, in for a pound, right? Might as well kill her. And then he finds out it's a fake knife, and he's like, stab, stabby stab. And it's just one of those things where this huge moment just happened, all this stuff at the end, and he's doing this little like thing with the fake knife where it's going in and out of her chest. He's like, stabby stab, and then they pick him up and arrest him. But it's so funny because it's the only slow-mo part where everyone's like, no, and she's like, ah. Right, so you saw this huge thing happen, and it's one of those things, you get to the end, it's such a satisfying feeling because she pretty much lied and was able to hold in her throw up till she threw up in his face. And as they're arresting him, and she asks the detective, you know, or private detective, Benoit Blanc, like, how did you know it was me, or when did you know I was involved? He's like, from the moment I met you. And then that's when he shows her, and you know, we all as the audience know that speck of blood on her shoe. And you're just like, so he knew she knew something, but he just kept her along. That's why he kept her close to him. And then it ends with him saying, oh, I don't know what you to do, because she asks him, well, I should help the family. And he's like, oh, I don't know, because we all know, we've seen them, they're all jerks, right? And then it ends with her on the balcony with that cup, like I said, and she sees the whole family there all staring at her, and she's like the queen of her new castle, drinking her coffee cup, you know, my house, my rules, my coffee, and it just ends. And it was fantastic. I actually can't wait to see it again because I want to pick up on all these little things I think you can see now. And it's also important is Grandma. Grandma was a funny character too. Look out for Grandma. Yeah, see this movie, see it when it's full of people. It's fun to laugh with other people. Like I said, it's funnier than you think, and little moments just make this movie spectacular.